All right, board members, would you please take your seats? All right, thank you, everyone. We're starting a little bit early, which means we can end a little bit early. We're scheduled for 3:30 to 6:30, and I suspect we can cut the meeting far short of 6:30 in light of what we expect to receive for advice and the decisions that we'll make on scup and on black sea bass. Fluke, I think, will be the species that takes a bit more time in light of the fact that we have an addendum to discuss and to approve, hopefully. And fortunately, we begin this meeting with some good news. And I don't mean the New England Patriots' spectacular win. I mean that we have not exceeded the recreational harvest limit for fluke, the coast-wide limit, at least not by much. I had been a bit of a pessimistic regarding that, and I had thought we might exceed it, and I was wrong. So fortunately, that was the case. Now, we have an agenda before us. Does anyone have any suggested changes to the agenda? All right, I see none. Therefore, we will adopt the agenda by consent. Proceedings from October 28. Jim?
Just one minor change, Mr. Chairman. It was Anthony Delernia was in the audience at the Mid-Atlantic Council. They listed him as Joseph Delernia, so just that minor correction. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that correction. Anything else regarding the proceedings? All right. Motion to approve the proceedings? I see no one willing to make a motion, so with no objection to the adoption of the proceedings, we will consider the proceedings adopted. All right. Public comment. As we always do, we afford the public an opportunity to address issues that are not on the agenda related to fluke, scup, and black sea bass. Is there anyone in the audience who cares to make a comment? Is there anyone in the audience? There they are over on the left. All right, with no interest expressed, we will then get to the first item on the agenda, which is draft addendum 26, final action. We've brought that draft addendum to public hearing, and I'll now turn to Kirby, who will review the options in the addendum, and then after he does that, after he refreshes our memories, we'll then have him go through the summary of public comments that we received at the many hearings that we've scheduled on the addendum. That'll be followed by advisory panel report, and then we'll get on to the discussion of the addendum itself and final approval. So, Kirby, if you will.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm going to, as Dr. Pierce mentioned, I'm going to go through the addendum real quickly just to refresh the board's memory on what the options are, and then go into the public comment summary first, the public hearing summary, and then the written comment summary. After that, Mark Robson will walk us through the Law Enforcement Committee's summary review, and we'll conclude with the advisory panel summary comments. So just for some background, draft addendum 26 was approved for public comment at the joint ASMFC Mid-Atlantic Council meeting in December of 2014. It proposed status quo and regional management options for summer flounder. The public comment period closed on January 23rd. In terms of the purpose of the document, it moved to try to continue some of the provisions that were outlined in Addendum 25, which sought to address concerns of equity across the management unit. As many people know, summer flounder has changed both in terms of abundance and distribution over the last 20 years, with the 2011 stock assessment update declaring the resource rebuilt. And during the last 20 years, there's been changes changes to the resource, and as such, the states have shown an interest in moving away from state-by-state management towards regional management, which is what was approved in Addendum 25. So draft Addendum 26 offered two main options. The first was to go back to what we call the Fishery Management Plan status quo, which is state-by-state conservation equivalency. That was approved for use at the joint meeting in December. The other option is option 2, adaptive regional management, which can be done under conservation equivalency. And in the document, it outlines a number of adaptive regional management options. And I'll go through those now briefly. Well, first, just as a refresher, what the state-by-state conservation equivalency could look like in 2015 if that was the preferred option by the board. Presented right now are what the state harvests are through Wave 5 and number of fish, what the 2014 state-by-state harvest targets would have been if state-by-state conservation equivalency is gone with in 2015. Those targets are what each of the states will be evaluated against. And in the far right column is what the 2015 state-by-state harvest targets would be in number of fish. Just, again, adaptive regional management offers for states within a region to have the same bag and size limit within the region. While season start and end dates may vary, they almost have the same length. And the goal is to propose management measures that are similar to the previous year's regulation. It's important to note that the option is not intended to implement new state allocations and is not intended to set a precedent for state allocations. And if adaptive regional management is approved for continuation today, the technical committee will develop regional management measures based on the option chosen with direction from the board, and we'll present those management measures back to the board for approval, for review and approval. One other note is just in terms of the time frame, as outlined earlier, in going back to, if the board chooses to go back to state-by-state management under conservation equivalency, the states will be evaluated against what their state targets would be, which is taking the proportion of their harvest in 1998 and applying it to a given year's recreational harvest limit. So that would be applying their proportion in 2014 to that RHL, and so that would be done for 2015 as well. In continuing adaptive regional management, depending on the option that's chosen by the board, the technical committee will look to the board for guidance on how and where changes to management measures are needed, depending on the regional alignment, and what type of coastwide buffer, if there should be one, how big it should be for setting a projected coastwide harvest. So in reviewing the adaptive regional management options, the first is to continue what was essentially the status quo from 2014. This slide differs from what was presented during the public hearings, as it shows what the projected coastwide harvest could be under these example measures, which are what were in place in 2014. Keep in mind that those projections, as they are for all the examples I'll go through, are based on data through Wave 5 of 2014, which is still preliminary and not finalized. So as you can see, this projected harvest is about 99.4% of what the recreational harvest limit is in 2015. The next option is similar to the regional management status quo with the addition of Rhode Island into the northern region. In terms of projected harvest, these set of management measures could achieve approximately 95% of the 2015 RHL. And then as a refresher for options 3 through 5, option A offers for Massachusetts and Rhode Island to stay as individual separate regions, whereas option B has Rhode Island included in the northern states region. Regional option 3A offers to split the state of New Jersey at approximately Little Egg Inlet, creating a set of management measures for Connecticut through northern New Jersey and a different set of management measures for southern New Jersey through Virginia. As noted in the document, in order to do this, technically New Jersey would have to become its own state region in order to self-divide itself into a northern and southern sections. The example management measures in here would achieve approximately 97% of the 2015 RHL. Regional option 3B moves to include Rhode Island with that northern region, and the projected harvest is listed. Regional option 4 moves to extend the southern region up through the Delaware Bay, creating a set of management measures from Delaware Bay south through Virginia. The northern region would constitute the states of Connecticut through New Jersey. The demarcation of where that extent in Delaware Bay has yet to be determined, whether it be at Cape May or a similar location. But for options 3 and 4, both offer a scenario where New Jersey would have to become its own state-specific region in order to divide area-specific management measures. Option 4B moves to include Rhode Island in that northern region of states. And regional option 5 creates a Delaware Bay specific set of management measures that differ from the rest of Delaware and differ from the management measures set for the rest of the state of New Jersey. The difference between option 5 and the previous two options is that this would create state-specific regions for Delaware and New Jersey as well to self-divide area-specific management measures. And 5B moves to include Rhode Island in that northern region. The proposed time frame, the addendum offers the option that for whatever option is chosen of the adaptive regional management, they could either be continued for 1 year, just for the 2015 fishing year, or for 2015, option 2, the option to have it for 2015 with the ability to extend it for an additional year through 2016. And moving through to the public comment summary, public hearings were held in the states of Virginia through Massachusetts in January 2015. Approximately 75 people attended these public hearings across the 8 states. Commissioners were in attendance as well. Written comments were submitted in addition to public hearing comments that were recorded. A total of 63 comments were received, with 3 comments being offered by organizations and/or groups. In terms of attendance, it varied across the coast. 15 members of the public attended in Delaware, whereas Virginia had 1 member of the public in attendance. And comments varied in terms of scope, stated preference, and form. We did receive a number of comments, both in the public hearing and in the written comments, that did not offer a specific preferred regional option, but did list preferred management measures. With regards to the public hearing, support was split between the 8 states for regional management options 1 or 2, as I mentioned before, either status quo or the addition of Rhode Island into the northern region, and options 4 and 5, which offer variations on splitting Delaware Bay either as part of the southern region or as a region-specific area. Total number of comments from the public hearings favored either maintaining the regional alignment in 2014 or moving to include Rhode Island in the northern region, just slightly above comments offered for support in regional options 4 and 5. In terms of reasons that were cited in favor of either maintaining the regional status quo or adding Rhode Island to the northern region, what was signified by satisfaction that many anglers had in terms of the management measures that were in place in 2014. Concerns were raised regarding how enforcement could be carried out for regional options 3 through 5, and reasons cited for regional management option 2 was a preference to move Rhode Island in with the northern states that were in the 2014 northern region, so as to have compatible management measures. Reasons that were cited in support of option 4 and 5 signified a preference for having same regulations between neighboring states and bordering regions. For 2014, the states of New Jersey and Delaware had a difference of about 2 inches in their size limit and about 128 days in their season length. There was also concern raised over loss of business to regions with less restrictive measures, so an effort to shift from New Jersey to Delaware, as well as concern that there was a different fish that many anglers were actually catching in southern New Jersey versus the rest of the state, as well as Delaware Bay in relation to northern New Jersey. Another reason cited for support of these options was for the northern region to have a longer season under the example management measures that were included in the document. In terms of the written comments received, almost all of the individual comments that we received indicated a preference for continuing regional management, with a slight majority in favor of splitting New Jersey either through regional option 3, a split across the state, or regional option 4. Some of the concerns were listed that are similar to what was outlined in the public hearings regarding concern of loss of business from the northern region to the southern region, as well as the availability of fish that were smaller than the legal size limit for that northern region in 2014. That was an 18-inch fish. And again, concern over fishing on the same water body, the Delaware Bay, while having different management measures. Breakdown of what those comments were is provided here. As noted in the document, some people offered both support and opposition with regards to certain options. So people were offering comments that were not simply counted at once, but could be counted twice, depending on if they were specifying support for one and opposition to another. The next is the LEC summary review, and I'll turn to Mark Robson to walk us through that.
Thank you, Kirby, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Law Enforcement Committee was able to convene a teleconference call on January the 26th to review these various management options in the addendum and provide comments. So I just will try to summarize those for you. They're pretty well bulleted here on the display. In general, the LEC appreciated the efforts that were made when we went to the adaptive regional management in 2014 2015 because it did appear to help make the size limits more consistent among the states than the previous iteration. And in general, as with many law enforcement comments, the larger or greater the regionalization that you can have with regard to regulations, the better it is in terms of enforceability, particularly when you have a number of states that are very contiguous to each other. So it does help to minimize angler confusion and also unintentional violations by recreational anglers. When we looked at the regional adaptive management proposals and the effort to try to deal with the problem between New Jersey and Delaware size limits, enforcement officers that were on the call, and we did have representation from New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia on the call. They did not report any significant enforcement issues with that differing size limit. However, as with an effort always towards consistency, they felt that it would be much better if you could have the same size limit. That would certainly aid enforceability. But they didn't note any significant enforcement issues dealing with those differences in size limits. Under option 3, there was a lot of discussion about the various options that split areas, and geographically, either splitting New Jersey in half or splitting the Bay. But for option 3, which is splitting New Jersey into 2 regions, it was expressed pretty strongly that it would present a lot of enforcement challenges and would create confusion among anglers. Of course, as a group, not seeing specifics as to where these lines would be drawn, they were careful to point out that how and where that dividing line is created would determine the type and the level of enforceability concerns that we might have to deal with. Along those lines, it came out eventually that obviously if you could use state boundary lines in any type of designation like this, these would be preferable from an enforcement perspective to any other type of geographical line or some other method of dividing a geographical area. The state lines are clear. They're well established, obviously, and they are easier to enforce for the officer on the water or at the docks, and they also are more understandable to the anglers. They do not recommend splitting states or water bodies without using established state boundaries. Depending on where the lines are drawn again, it may be possible for anglers to catch legal fish in one area and then cross the line, obviously, where their catch would become illegal. And this is a problem for enforcement officers because in most situations they're enforcing strict liability standards. So, it may be very clear that an angler did not intend to violate a regulation when he came back to port and had an undersized fish. Nonetheless, the officer is obligated to enforce the regulations at that location. And that's what we mean by strict liability, regardless of intent. So it puts the angler and the officer in a difficult situation and not a place where they would like to be if they can avoid it. Option 4 presents the same concerns, again, depending on where the dividing lines are drawn. But the potential does exist for enforcement problems and angler concerns, particularly in the Cape May area, if that's, depending on, again, how that line is drawn between the two areas. For option 5, creating Delaware Bay as a specific region, they felt that pretty much the same enforceability problems would ensue, but in this case, instead of perhaps just on one side of the bay, you'd have the same kinds of problems on both sides of the bay. Without the benefit of knowing how these boundaries would be drawn, it's difficult to assess in this conference call our specific enforcement concerns, but they could be significant, particularly down in the southern part of the Bay Area if that line is drawn in a particular way. And for the option of time frame, obviously the Law Enforcement Committee is pretty consistent in this recommendation a lot. We would certainly like to see a regulation, whatever is implemented, put in place and left in place for as long as possible. So we would certainly prefer having implementation through at least 2016. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any questions for Kirby or for Mark?
We also have the summary.
Yeah, right. Rob.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and direct questions to Kirby. Thank you, Kirby, for your presentation. You put a lot of information right out front, and I think that's good. A couple things that I'm interested in about your presentation, which will come up later, so I just want to, sort of get a plug in now for equity, because the word was a pretty big component of many calls we had last year and was used over and over again. And I just want to say that when it comes time to talk about maybe a failing of the regional approach, it might concern equity, that when there is trouble, when there is an overage of the RHL, which is more substantial than what we're looking at this year, if in fact, depending on whether you look at the number of fish or whether you look at the weight where the overage is. But when we revisit some of those years, such as 2006 and 2007, there are other years back in time, when there are overages and when we have some year classes that resemble the 2009 year class again, since we haven't really had one since then equity should apply. And I think it does, to the way we approach addressing the overages. So we're going to have a conversation about that later, but you brought up the word equity, and I think it has two avenues. One is to allow for harvest, since we know from 2009 through 2013, we really didn't allow that. It didn't occur. Most of the time was spent making sure that we were, I'll say, ultra-conservative, that we didn't run any risks. And I think that's really not the objective. I think the harvest objective is more important. So equity is one thing you mentioned. The second thing you mentioned was buffer. Talking about the buffer, and that's going to be a conversation in depth probably a little bit later as well. However, I think as we go forward today, we should have some information from you, Kirby. It doesn't have to be exact, but where do we stand with BMSY? Where do we stand with our year class strengths? Where do we stand with the next assessment update? My understanding is we did not have one recently. We're going to have one, and so that brings into question this idea that the ASAP model has been showing that sort of a diminution of that 2009 year class, 2008 year class, and some others. I mean, so I think it's important when we talk about buffer later that we talk about it in the context of the status of the stock, or the best description you can give us right now. And I didn't mean to load you down with that, but I think it's important as we move forward.
Okay, thank you, Rob. There was a question in there, I know. You're a plan development team member, so I cut you some slack. Now, next, I'm asking for specific questions. No comments, please. No further comments. Comments will be entertained when a motion is made. So, a question, Kirby or Mark? Jim.
Kirby, and just I think I have this right, but say we take one of the examples and we did option 5 or whatever, that right now that says we have a set of numbers there that I think would be 18 and a half inches or 4 fish, but again, that was emphasized clearly that that was an example, so that we could use that same option and have an 18-inch size limit if we wanted to adjust the numbers. Is that correct?
Yes, thanks, Jim. That is correct. So these were example measures that the technical committee put together based on the regional alignment. Again, there was little to no guidance offered by the board when it came to offering what those management measures could be for each of the regions. But the TC did review, and technically it was sound by their vote. As I mentioned earlier, again, what the board should move forward with today is if they choose to go with a regional option, is choosing the preferred regional option with the understanding that off of that they would then provide the technical committee with guidance on what would be preferred management measures for a given region, understanding that constraints may need to be put in place to constrain the coastwide harvest to the recreational harvest limit, but there are variations allowed from what was included in the included in the document.
Yeah, to reiterate, we'll be getting from the technical committee, not today, but at a subsequent gathering, the specific regional measures that would enable us to achieve not exceed the recreational harvest limit. And all of the measures that are in these tables that we brought to public hearing were examples, and obviously that posed a challenge for many of the members of the public because they looked at those tables and they thought they were the measures, but we made it clear that they were not. So those measures will be offered up to us for our consideration after we provide the technical committee with our decision as to what option we are going to select for 2015 and perhaps beyond. In addition, those measures that they will provide based on the option we select will be influenced by another decision we might have to make today, and it's up to the board. Are we going to be satisfied with the buffer that we adopted for 2014, or do we want to have a larger buffer, for example, in 2015? So depending upon the decision that we make, that'll provide guidance to the technical committee as to the measures they will then bring forward to us. David and then John.
Thanks. Hopefully you can help me with this. I'm trying to figure out, sort of to Rob's point about equity and what we're trying to achieve here. I'm thinking about Delaware Bay and wondering how many fish would be required to get the Jersey portion of Delaware Bay in line with Delaware's 16 inches and however many fish in open season. One of the challenges of the options, and you can't do an unlimited number, is embedded in the option that shows up in the proposal is that 95% target. So when I look at it, when my constituents look at that option, they see it costs Connecticut and neighboring states a half an inch to get Delaware Bay on the same page. Now, checking back home, the thought was it could be as much as 100,000 fish to bring the Jersey portion of Delaware Bay in line with Delaware, or is it a fraction of that? Is this rounding error, or is it substantial? If John or Kirby, could help.
We'll
do the AP summary.
Hold on. As he's John is working on the analysis, so while he's doing that, let me turn to you, John, and then David will get back to you, okay, with an answer, we hope. John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentations, Kirby and Mark. Kirby, I'm just still kind of confused by the regions in some of these options. Last year, my recollection, based on what was in Framework 2 and some of the earlier amendments, all states in a region had to have the same size limits and the same possession limits. Now we're at the point where we have regions that are states, and within those states, they're sub-regions. For example, one of these options has Delaware having 2 different size limits within the state. So I'm just curious, is a region just whatever we say it is, or are there any limits on what is called a region? And then the second part of that is, if you can have different size limits within a state, is one of them kind of the actual limit for the region, and then the other part of that is the state is being asked to be more conservative or more liberal in a certain part of the state? How does that work?
So again, in terms of the conservation equivalency, dictates that if regions are to be formed, they have to have the same, as you said, size limit, bag limit, and season length. The reason for, and I tried to highlight, it was tried to be pointed out in the document, but for a state to divide itself, in order for it to do so, it would have to be its own region, because otherwise each state within that region would have the ability to self-divide. So if it was New Jersey, say option 3, each state within that northern region would have to be able to self-divide. So New York would be able to divide at some point, maybe on Long Island. Connecticut would have to be able to self-divide at some point in their state. And so in order for one state, only one state within a region to divide itself by area, you'd have to really just have that state as a standalone region, similar to how Massachusetts and Rhode Island were their own standalone regions in 2014.
If I could just follow up on that, but in these cases where the state has separate size limits within its own state, within one state, is there a option that is being passed now, and then that state is being asked to be, like I said, take Delaware's case here. Are we given a 16-inch size limit and then said, as a region in Delaware Bay, you have to be more conservative and have a 17-inch limit? Or is this region right off the bat having two different size limits? Because in that case, it's not really a region, right? I mean, we'd have to, as a region, we'd have one size limit and one possession limit, and then we could be more conservative or more liberal in the sub-region. And if that's the case, can we be compelled to do that?
Yeah, so what we tried to outline in the public hearing process was that the management measures on paper would be your regions, but by how conservation equivalency defines regions, in theory, that state that is self-dividing itself would be a region unto itself. So all the other states within that region would set themselves to a certain bag, size, season, and then that single state, say for example Delaware, where you have to have two separate sets of measures, the request would be for Delaware to have the two separate sets of measures that align with either their northern extent or their southern extent. But in actuality, as I said, Delaware would be its own region, its own state-specific region, and it would be requested that that state would then fall in line with those regional measures. Does that make sense?
It does. It's just, like I said, it just seems very convoluted for a regional approach. But thank you.
All right, go ahead.
So in 2014, it's estimated that New Jersey's portion of Delaware Bay landed about 86,000 summer flounder. So by the time you're done expanding the season and decreasing the size limit, that would require 113,000 fish.
All right, further questions? Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess the question is either for you or Kirby regarding the direction that you're looking for today from the board. I understand that we are going to make a decision regarding adaptive regional management, potentially selecting an option, and then having a discussion regarding the buffer that would be put in place towards the 2015 TAC. The next step to that would be the TC going back to create measures within the regions. However, there is no direction in the plan at all about which regions are going to be responsible for achieving, let's say, a small reduction in order to get down from a proposed 99% catch down to, let's say, the board decides on a 95% buffer or a 5% buffer. And I think so I guess the question is that an additional element? Are you looking for the board to provide direction as to which regions are going to be the ones who will need to take those hits. And I think about this, given that there are some states within the regions who have given a lot of what they're donating, and they're the donor states to this regional approach based on their 1998 allocation. So it's just a thought about where you guys want to go with this at the end of the day. Thanks.
Yes, that is correct. The technical committee, depending on what regional option is chosen, will need direction from the board from today's meeting on how to, in turn, craft management measures for that region.
Yes, it can be as Kirby said, or we can do it across the board, all states having to take necessary steps to achieve that overall additional cut that would relate to a larger buffer. If indeed that's what the board decides to do, we haven't gotten there yet. Anyone else who has not yet asked a question? Louis.
Pat Augustine's back and he brought cookies.
I thought we had a lot at lunch already, so all right, more is always good. Rob.
This is my first question for the record.
Your second one.
Last one was ruled out. So it's made to sound as if something magical is going to happen from the technical committee. And two thoughts here specifically to the examples, which were mentioned, that these are examples. There has to be some realism about these examples. I can't imagine the technical committee using the 2014 data as the base is going to have a lot more flexibility than what we see in these examples. They can change a little bit, but I'd like to hear about that, first of all, specifically because when I look at some of the regional splits, or some of the regions, looking at the option which has New Jersey split in option 3, I have 3A, Virginia falls to 102,299 fish. And I know this is coastwide, an offset of coastwide, and it's regional, but there are projections involved on the state still within a region, and it gets a little worrisome when you realize that Virginia had 97,000 fish in 2013, just in its worst wave, wave 2, March and April. So my overall question is, how much flexibility is the technical committee really going to have to make this to constrain to the RHL? And that's the question.
So in terms, as I mentioned before, of providing guidance to the technical committee and crafting up the potential regional management measures, the board can specify, if they prefer, a certain time frame within the fishery as a consideration for developing those measures. I think that would be at this point, I think that's the extent I can probably speak to it.
I'll have to come back to that, Rob, because it's not clear to me and certainly not clear to you the degree of flexibility. So we'll come back to that once we make a determination as to the option that we will pick for this year. I had one other hand over here. Adam, go ahead. Question?
Thank you. To the end of a lot of these questions about what some alternative measures could be with regards to the 3, 4, and 5 options, the state of New Jersey had put together some alternatives for 5A. Kirby, do you have those, and were you planning to provide those to the board today, as it might answer some of the questions about what some alternatives could be?
My understanding is that you did provide, you and your New Jersey colleagues have provided some additional options to Kirby. I'll turn to Kirby or Tony and ask for your opinion regarding whether or not those particular options can be entertained, since I don't believe they were brought to public hearing. Good. Either one.
So, New Jersey provided Commission staff with variations on regional option 5A for consideration last week. In addition, another set of another regional management option that was not included in the document. We have those items, and we could put them up. In terms of the second one, Commission staff found that the option 6 was outside of the scope of the document that went out to public comment, and that the region was not in concert with other regions that were being offered or considered. In terms of options 5A1 and 5A2, we can put those up if New Jersey wants to provide clarification on what they offer relative to the options in the document.
Clarification. So you're saying then that a couple of suggestions offered up by New Jersey are consistent with the scope of the document we brought to public hearing? That's a very important point for us now, because we don't want to discuss any options that cannot be seriously entertained because they were outside the scope of what we brought to public hearing.
That is correct. They offered 2 variations on regional option 5. It's further down the slide. I'll work with staff to get it up on the board, but the latter 2, there were 4 total, and the latter 2 were not within the scope of the document.
All right. Do we have any handouts that would provide those specific options that New Jersey might want to offer up? We don't? Okay. All right.
So we have it up on the board.
It's on the board? Okay. All right. So board members, apparently these are within the scope of the public hearing, so these potentially would be options that can be considered amongst the mixed. So with your forbearance, Adam, did you want to speak to these motions to explain what we have up on the board? Is there any need for elaboration? That's my question.
No, I think the intent of these, Mr. Chairman, was just to highlight that there were options. The information we put forth included some of the fish numbers that have been discussed here. With regards to Virginia, some of these numbers kept their numbers up near 140,000 fish, which was consistent with some of the other options that were here. So again, the intent here was just to put forth some options to say Delaware Bay could be kept separate while maintaining the 18-inch size limit from New Jersey to Rhode Island. And that was our intent to the board, so that they would have that information in moving forward with what option to move forward with today.
All right. Thank you, Adam. Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to get some clarification on, and I think this is, as we went through this quickly again this year. So when we first put the addendum out, there was some numbers that were put in, and there was different things that were actually in the supplemental material. I just want to make sure we're on the same page. So just bear with me for a moment. First off, when the addendum came out, based upon the projections on Wave 5, we were 4% over the RHL. And then when we got to some of the public hearings, there were things like in Massachusetts that were indicating that not only did the region from New Jersey through Connecticut over-harvest, they were actually maybe over-harvesting affecting Massachusetts harvest. And then essentially there was other indications that the Connecticut through New Jersey region had gone way over. So I just wanted to clarify that the most recent information that I have, and this is talking through the TC folks, whatever, is that first off, in terms of that issue about the harvest in the Connecticut through New Jersey region, we actually harvested 150,000 less fish than we had previously the year before. So, and then Massachusetts harvest actually went up 3 times. So I think we actually helped Massachusetts in terms of getting more fish, if you want to look at it. So those numbers were a little skewed from whatever. That seems to be the actual information right now that's correct. And when we looked at the New York region with that 150, New York through Connecticut and New Jersey, we actually harvested 150,000 less than the previous year, so we were at 99.6% of the target. So just a long discussion about, and what I'm trying to get at is that we hit the target. There was some information in the target by a little bit over, but slightly over, but not dramatically over, where there was some, and I think that's what was put in some of the documents. So I wanted to, clarify that we pretty much hit the target. This worked pretty well, and again, if you looked at different versions of the documents as we went along, some of them were sort of saying wildly inaccurate things.
Yes,
and when you're ready, Mr. Chairman, I do have a motion.
Yeah, we all did an excellent job with regard to our planning and the execution of that plan. The target was not exceeded. Combination of luck, perhaps, and good planning. So anyway, it's a pat on our backs, collective backs. Before I entertain the motions, however, there is another report to be given. So let's get that report before we move on to specific options, and that would be the report of the advisory panel. So Kirby, are you giving that? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The AP met by conference call last week and provided a few comments with regards to draft addendum 26. Overall, the group felt that regional management alignment and management measures worked well. There was concern raised over the restriction in harvest for the northern region for the days with regards to Wave 3, as 45 days were specified as part of the management measures. And concern was also raised over how and where harvest effort may shift in 2015 depending on the regional alignment changes. Two AP members also offered up some information from NEMAP with regards to trawl information on length frequency as an effort to offer a justification on where a regional boundary could be drawn in the state of New Jersey. The first one shows what the length frequency distribution for summer flounder caught by the NEMAP trawl survey north and south of Little Egg Inlet. As you can see, the trend mirrors across spatial extent. The other one being the NEMAP trawl survey for north and south of Barnegat Bay, or Barnegat Inlet, where there is overlap but deviation between that spatial extent. And that concludes the AP's comments.
All right, thank you. All right, we've been at this for an hour or so. I think it is time for a motion. So, Jim, you indicated you had a motion to make. If you would please make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move to approve Option 2, Adaptive Regional Management, as a management program under Addendum 26.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second to the motion? Second by David Simpson. I'll read the motion. The motion is to approve Option 2, Adaptive Regional Management, as the management program under Addendum 26. Motion by Mr. Gilmore, seconded by Mr. Simpson. All right, discussion on the motion. Rick?
Yeah, just to clarify, that's regional option, the management option under the two options, as opposed to conservation equivalency or regional option. Is that what we're getting at, or is it regional option number 2 in the options under regional options?
Jim, would you speak to that question?
It was, I'm sorry, could you state that again, Rick? There was only 2 options. It was either 1 or 2, so I took Option 2.
Well, let me jump in. To clarify, Option 2 is Adaptive Regional Management, right? And then under Adaptive Regional Management, we have choices. regional option 1, regional option 2, regional option 3. So if you could clarify your intent.
That was, I guess there were 3 sections to this, Mr. Chairman. I thought it might be easier to take them one at a time. So we're going to go with the management option, then we go with the regions, and then we would go with the time frame. So this was just to the first part.
All right, thank you. That makes discussion on the motion, I think, a little bit easier. So clarification has been given by Jim. We're talking about regional management versus, we're talking about option 1 versus option 2. Option 1 being the FMP status quo, coastwide or conservation equivalency, and then option 2 being the adaptive regional management. So we're talking about adaptive regional management. Further discussion on the motion? I see none. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by raising your hand. I'm sorry, I apologize. Is there a need for a caucus? Apparently there is. Okay, if 60 seconds.
Dave, could be a little discussion on Dave, can we have a little discussion on the fact, too?
I asked if there was any discussion on the motion. I saw no hands, so... But the motion is on the board. You care to discuss the motion? If you do, fine. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah. I just want to comment on what happened last year and what we're looking for this year in the discussion. I mean, as you know, we all opposed, New Jersey opposed for regional management last year very strongly, and states forced us into a regional management and then changed its mind in the following conference call and let 2 other regions split out as their own individual regions, but still not allowing New Jersey to do that. So there was some changes as we went out to public hearings and what we did. The consequences of what you did last year, you did it to basically, National Marine Fisheries Service pushed it because we weren't being fair and equal with New York because our size limits were different. What that he did create was a little bit of a windfall for Delaware and a real problem with the people that fish in Delaware Bay. I mean, you only had not even a 1-inch size limit, you had a 2-inch size limit and a difference of 128-day season now and a year-round season. We're looking at going forward with this, but we need that issue addressed as we get further down the line. So that's one of the reasons we're not voting against it today.
All right, thank you, Tom. Is there a need for a caucus? I see no need. All right. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by raising your hand. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Those in opposition? No votes? Abstentions? 1 abstention. Did New Jersey vote? Yes. Okay. All right. The motion passes. All right. So adaptive regional management is the choice of the board. I look now to the board for any additional motions regarding the nature of that adaptive regional management. David Simpson.
Our great experiment last year, I'll call it, seemed to work out pretty well. It was a long journey to get there. I think it certainly improved equity, and we apparently have hit the numbers. So some combination of being good and lucky, perhaps, but it always takes a little bit of luck in this business. In terms of looking at region by region expected harvest, region by region, I think we did pretty well with the exception of Rhode Island, perhaps, was over the expected harvest and the expected harvest if we were working on 98 based allocations. I'm also sensitive, this is a long prelude, but I think it's important. In terms of issues of timeliness, it is February. We do need to get on with rulemaking. and I'm loath to consider starting all over again if we pick options 2 through N that we aren't done. We'll have another month or 2 of this. So with the understanding or hope that Rhode Island could make some adjustments to come a little closer toward where the Connecticut to New Jersey region is in terms of their management measures, I would move regional option 1, status quo.
All right, the motion is regional option 1. The regional approach used in 2014. Is there a second to the motion? Emerson? Okay. We now have a motion. I will read it. Move to approve regional option 1, status quo. Motion by Mr. Simpson and seconded by Mr. Hasbrook. Discussion on the motion. Adam.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Clearly, the move to regional management was in deference to the inequities in shared waters, and essentially all we have done is displace that inequity. Therefore, I would move to substitute option 5A, and I would also add to 5A that no region would have greater than an 18-inch size limit. And if I can get a second to that, then we can have further discussion on that. Thank you.
All right, there is a motion to substitute. Is there a second to Adam's motion to substitute? Is there a second?
No second.
I see no second. All right, we're back on the main motion. Back on the motion, as made by David. Rob.
Although I realize that there's quite a few options to look at, and it's difficult to balance everything, I think we're still in the experimental phase. That's right. And I think that it makes sense to me to stay put and have status quo at this time. And I know that that doesn't sit well with some, but I think we need to see another round of this at least.
Anything further on the motion? Thank you. Tom.
I talked to a lot of you over the last couple of days, and you were kind of understanding of what was going on in Delaware Bay. But let me reiterate what went on. When you raised the size limit by 2 inches in Delaware Bay on the New Jersey side and dropped Delaware to a 16-inch size, it made for a reallocation of where people fished. Unlike the border between New York and New Jersey, people are not running from northern New Jersey to New York to fish or back and forth like that, mainly because it costs you $27 just for the 2 bridge tolls before you make the trip over, unlike going to Delaware to fish. The boats that were fishing on the Delaware Bay, out of Fortescue and those areas, really suffered a huge setback in monetary means. Now, this is what you put in regionalization last year, and I sat here and listened to John Bollard basically push this point that we needed to be fair and equitable about this. This will make the size limit the same. But right now, you're telling us that you cannot do that in the other end of the state, and you don't care what the other economic impact it is to those fishermen, which was greater than was the impact that was going on between New York and New Jersey by having a different size limit. This is really put a community in bankruptcy by selling boats. I mean, it's just as simple as that. When you can't take people out fishing because it's easier from Pennsylvania to go down to Delaware, and it doesn't cost you any difference in tolls or anything else. It's just what you can catch. If you can go down there, catch a 16-inch size limit, why should I come to Fortescue or any of those ports along there and basically fish? We were hoping that would be addressed because it was an experiment, and we felt the effects of that experiment in New Jersey very hard. It didn't affect anybody else, and of course, Delaware felt a good windfall on that, and I can understand why they want to stay status quo. But it was supposed to be a commission that works works together. And, you know, people said, well, we have to reallocate. Well, you did a lot of reallocating last year, and we're looking for some relief from that reallocation. And what I hear around this table is no support for that. Kind of like burying your heads under the table and saying, well, you're tough for New Jersey again, like we did last year. And it doesn't send the right message. I mean, it's maybe time for, you know, New York came in and complained, filed threatened lawsuits, got their senators involved and everything else. I guess that's the only recourse New Jersey has to get a fair and equitable treatment at the Commission on this issue, because it is really affecting the people. And, you know, when you're taking money out of the people's pockets, and that's a depressed area of the state, as you look at the jobless rate that's going on down there, and sport fishing was important to those people on the Delaware Bay. It's one of the few industries we got there that's located on the bay. And you take a town like Fortescue, which totally depends on fishing, and basically take their only means of making income, it affects all the businesses down there. And we just asked them for a small recourse and completely get shut out. Well, we'll go status quo. So I'm very, very upset.
Further discussion on the motion. John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't want to get into the whole Delaware Bay issue, just to say that it hasn't been a windfall for Delaware that Tom's making it seem like. And as Roy brought up last year, we've had differences in the size limits across the bay for years and years, except the shoe's always been on the other foot, and we haven't had complaints about it. But I was just curious, based on the estimation that option one would lead to us pretty much filling the RHL, what is Rhode Island planning to do to lower the take there? Because I see option two would put us down into a safer area of 95% of RHL. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, John. Michael.
Yeah, my question was just answered, but my comment was to what Mr. Simpson kind of alluded to as he was preparing to make the motion, his point that I think we can, you know, go with an option one at status quo if Rhode Island can do a little something to balance off the RHL from being at that 100% or 99, I don't have the number in front of me, 99.9%, because 0.4, I'm getting yelled at from one side here. My other side's all messed up, so I'd like to hear a little bit about that, the speculating, and that will be the case, because the question I asked earlier was, once we make the decision on the option, and then we discuss as a board what buffer we'd like to consider, the technical committee is going to need some more guidance on that. And if that guidance is that Rhode Island makes some change to account for a buffer that we discuss, I'd like to hear what the thoughts are on that from Rhode Island. Thank you.
Okay, well, John and Michael have asked the question of Rhode Island, and I'll ask if Rhode Island would care to comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the consideration in terms of asking Rhode Island to look at what it can do to help address its overage with regard to the regional, with regard to the region that it's in under option 1A, or I'm sorry, under regional option 1. I will say that there is an opportunity here to come down a bit on bag and season, I think, in particular, but I don't think that's going to necessarily make much of a difference in terms of the buffer issue. I think that's more of an optics issue than anything else. There are not many options available to us, as I see it, that would lead to significant reductions, if you will, in the coast-wide RHL. So I just have to be honest about that. I don't see that. I think we're talking about two different issues here. I think on the one hand, there might be a sense that because Rhode Island did go over, and by the way, several states went over their state-based RHL. I guess on a regional basis, there is the issue for Rhode Island that we would have to address, and we would be prepared to address it in whatever way the technical
full committee advises. I think that's the best answer I can offer you, Mike. I really don't see what we can offer right here, right now, in the way of concrete adjustments that would address the buffer issue, because I think that's a lot of fish. 5% of the coastwide RHL is a lot of fish, a lot more than Rhode Island could possibly accommodate in terms of any reduction. So I think the board just needs to be aware of that we might be looking at a situation very similar in 2015 to the one that we had in 2014, which, by the way, resulted in being right on the target. So it's really a discussion more about the buffer and how to get, and whether the board wants to pursue that and how we should get there. And I really don't know how else to, what else we can offer.
Okay, Bob, thank you for your frankness. Appreciate that. David.
Yeah, to be clear, because I don't want to choose an option that forces one state to make a change and not others, but I really do feel that gestures are important, and some movement in that harvest reduction direction, I think, will be very helpful to NOAA when they review our conservation equivalency proposal. And I certainly understand Rhode Island can't reduce harvest to achieve a 5% reduction on the coast. They only have about a 5 or 8% share on the coast. But I think, and I would not expect them to go up on the minimum size. I think my hope and expectation would be that they would match the Connecticut to New Jersey area in terms of measures, 18 inches, 5 fish, and 128-day open season. I think the public would see as a very fair, very reasonable thing to do, even recognizing that it's not going to bring Rhode Island's harvest within the requirements that the 98-based allocation would argue, or what our expected harvest from last year would argue. But I think it would be a very important gesture for a couple of reasons if they could make that kind of commitment.
Thank you, David. Again, to the motion. All right. Is there a need for a caucus? There is. Okay. For about 60 seconds. All right. Are we all set? All right, I believe we are. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by raising your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. Those in opposition? Any no votes? Any abstentions? We got 9-0. All right, the motion passes 9-0-2.
Oh, sorry, one opposition.
Oh, 9 in favor, 1 opposition, and 2 abstentions. All right, thank you for that clarification. All right, so we have selected the regional option for this year. Is there any... Okay, David.
I'm anticipating you looking for another motion. That would be, do we do this for 1 year or 1 year with an option for 2? And I would move the latter, 1 year with an option for a follow-up year without going out to addendum. Is that...
Okay, so your motion is?
To, what is it? Jim says I'm moving option 2.
All right, so let's make sure we've got the correct language. Option 2 would be on page 17 of the addendum, I believe. Option 2 is 1 year with the option to extend for 1 year. And to be complete with regard to a description of what this option is, just so everyone understands, the board would take action through a board vote to extend the addendum for 1 year, expiring at the end of 2016. After 2016, measures would revert back to the FMP status quo coastwide measures. So that is option 2. Is there a second to the option? Second to the motion? Jim? All right. The motion is before the board. I've already read, well, I'll read it again. Motion to approve option 2 under section 3.1.1, time frame for summer flounder measures. Motion by Mr. Simpson, seconded by Mr. Gilmore. Discussion on the motion. I see no need for, Rob?
It's difficult enough having gone through 1 year of regional management, and it fit to some extent. The management measures in the region that Virginia's in are the same that were available in 2013. That hasn't changed. Despite the difficulty, I think as long as we don't get into these situations where we're wondering about intent and good faith and the ad hoc approach, I think it makes sense to go forward with just right now with a 2-year approach. But I think there has to be some talk afterwards about what we do for the future, and I'll have something to follow up on that in a minute. But thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion? Tom? Go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to state that, you know, as far as the 2-year option goes, it prolongs this board from looking at the discrepancy in measures amongst water bodies, and that will remain for that much longer. That's it.
Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think, you know, what Dave and hopefully put this up for was that really to save work. I mean, if we hopefully get to the same point next year, we'll shortcut the addendum process a bit. If we get to the point where we are having problems, I think we'll have to revisit this whole thing. So that was my intent in seconding this, that it was really a work-saving measure if we do indeed, you know, have a good year again in 2015. Thanks.
Yeah, my assumption is that in light of the discussions we've had about New Jersey and Delaware in particular, that there would be further conversations between the states, between the industry, between the board members as to, you know, what can be done, what should be done. Is it possible for the 2 states to come up with something that this board can entertain as a satisfactory outcome for both states? David?
Yeah, and I don't make this motion to preclude that discussion and investigation. That's why I asked early on, you know, how many fish would it take to address the Delaware Bay issue, because my hope is we do a little better this year and we can come back to that with some fish to work with. So we're not foreclosing on it by any means. I'm not.
Thank you. David's made it clear that there's no foreclosure. Okay, Tony.
I was just going to say, in addition, you know, we're working on this omnibus amendment with the Mid-Atlantic Council, and as we build that amendment, we are looking at recreational measures and how to move forward with that. And so I'm assuming that this board will be working on this very issue with that, and hopefully that amendment would be completed by the end of 2017, fingers crossed, so that we would have something to work forward with and not have to go out for another addendum later on.
Thank you, Tony. Rick?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, Tony just brought up what I was going to also state, that this will give us a chance to get a few years of one consistent type of management. If everything goes well next year, we can continue that trend and hopefully use that information as we work towards that more omnibus amendment.
Adam.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the comments that doing this for potentially 2 years doesn't preclude work on addressing the Delaware Bay discrepancy. But I would ask, Mr. Chairman, if we don't have Delaware Bay as a separate region, what is there to work on? If New Jersey is constrained by the same regulations in terms of number of days, size, and bag limit as New York and Connecticut, and Delaware is constrained by the same with Maryland and Virginia, what exactly is there to work on?
Further comments on the motion? Tom.
When we discussed regionalization many years ago, we looked at what real regions are with similar fisheries and how they would be affected by changing regulation and putting together. I mean, we're going to look at Tautog later, and one of the things about Tautog is that we should be looking at a region like Long Island Sound as a separate region. And we're going to run into the same thing, well, how do you divide it between the states? Well, that is a region. I mean, I lived on the North Shore. I fished on the North Shore many years before I moved to New Jersey. And I understand that it's really a separate region. It's a lot different from the west end of Long Island, which I grew up in Brooklyn, and in the east end of Long Island. When we basically did this, we were saying we're going to be fair and equitable and try to reduce people's problems. You created a giant problem. If you keep boats are going out of business in Delaware Bay because of this problem on the Jersey side. In another year, we'll have more boats going out of business. And if this was Rhode Island or Massachusetts, they'd be screaming and yelling and carrying it on, and we'd be doing a separate amendment to look at this. And it just seems that we've got caught in the middle, as we usually do, because as we sit in the middle of the Mason-Dixon line, they form coalitions on both sides, and we get kind of caught in the middle of a lot of these plans as they go forward to. It's just very depressing that we have an industry in New Jersey that is, from a community that is really based on fishing, that is suffering so greatly in a low-income area, and we're going to basically cause problems. And we're not really going to, because I can see us coming, we had these options to handle this problem in this document went out to public hearings. We couldn't even get a second to look on this as this. And a lot of people for the last couple of days says, yeah, we should look at this, we should look. But even for discussion, you wouldn't give it. I don't hold much hope you're going to be doing this again next year unless we put some real pressure on from other places. Sorry about that.
With no objection, I'm going to call the question. All right. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by raising your hand. Those in opposition? Any no votes? Any abstentions? So we're 9 in favor, 1 opposite, one opposed, and 2 abstentions. So the motion carries. Does the board care to address the question of the buffer? If not, then we'll continue with the buffer that we used for 2014, the 5% buffer, I believe. All right. Adam.
Could you just provide a clarification on that statement? What in the addendum would require us to use the 5%? And I see, I don't know.
As mentioned before, there's actually nothing in the addendum that specifies what the buffer would be under any of the management options, nor does it specify specifically where changes would be made to regional management options. Again, as outlined in the document, the board would need to provide direction to the technical committee on both of those fronts.
Well, again, my assumption is that the 5% buffer that we subscribed to for 2014 would be used again for 2015, unless the board decides to go in a different direction. 7%, less than 5. What's the board's pleasure? David.
My understanding and my intent from my motion was we're going to do exactly what we did last year. So when we developed those rules last year, we incorporated some sort of buffer, 4 or 5%. And so I hope what you're saying is that by applying the same rules this year in 15 that we applied in 14, we've incorporated a buffer. Because my intention after that motion passes is to adopt an 18-inch minimum size, 5-fish limit, and an open season from May 17th to September 21st, just what we did last year. Is that...
All right, there's some confusion about the buffer on my part, apparently. Kirby is going to provide some clarification. Tony.
Dave, I think what you're asking is when the TC comes back to the board with a set of management measures that would achieve but not exceed the RHL, that we provide you with options that actually achieves 95% of the RHL as we provided you last year, because that's what we did. So that's not what you're asking for. Okay.
All right. Well, that's colors things a little bit. All right, David, if you would.
Right, specifically to avoid everyone having to go back through these questions of which regions cut how much and all of that. My intent in my motion that passed, and I thought it was everyone's understanding, is we're going to adopt the measures we adopted last year. That's the end of it. That precludes a discussion about if we choose an alternative to what we did last year, is our target 100% of our RHL or 95%? I mean, I can make a case that adopting the same measures incorporates the same buffer, but if you feel we need a vote now for 100% of target or 95, fine, you can ask for that motion, but my intention and my expectation is we're going to adopt status quo measures.
Well, all right, that's, there is a need for a clarification. So we would be Kirby? Go ahead.
Just to clarify, so as I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, the board, it was requested the board choose which regional management option if that was the pleasure of the board. That didn't specify what the management measures would be in that regional management alignment. Just to understand what the management measures for 2014 could possibly affect for the coastwide harvest in 2015, it's a different projection than it was in 2014. As such, that's a different buffer than what we were playing with, or what the technical committee crafted last year. Again, to try to make sense of it, if you set the buffer relative to what the 2015 recreational harvest limit is, that will give you a coastwide harvest to work with that would create different management measures. But if you approve a set of management measures that were in line with what was in place in 2014, that will not ensure the same buffer that was in place in 2014.
All right, so it wouldn't necessarily ensure the same buffer. Are you saying, Kirby, that at this point in time we don't know what that buffer would be?
Well, as included in the document, based on data through Wave 5, if management measures were held constant under regional management status quo, the projected coastwide harvest would be approximately 99.4% of the RHL. And again, these are based on projections. The difference between that and setting a, say, 5% buffer to what the 2015 recreational harvest limit is that coastwide harvest then would require a different set of management measures by regions.
Tony, you're having a little bit of a sidebar here. Is there a disagreement within staff? No? All right. All right. Well, anyways, we did vote, and we did vote to go with our regional option number 1, which would be the same measures for 2015. That was the motion that was adopted. All right. Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is I'm still a little bit confused. This is the same issue I've brought up twice now about the further direction to the technical committee. If the board's happy at this point with going forward in 2015 with like measures from 2014 with a 99.4% chance of reaching the RHL, then we all go home today and nobody has to make any changes. But there was some discussion, there were some questions asked and answered regarding the possibility or, for Rhode Island, I'll be specific, to go back and say, well, maybe we can do a little more to find a little more balance to that northern region. But I'm understanding the way, if we don't have any more discussion or motions on this point right now, the TC is not going to go and provide any recommendations or options for the states. If we move, let's say we pick a 96%, a 4% buffer, it's my understanding that the TC would go back, they would look at the regions, and we all may face some changes for next year, for which I think is going to be an incredible challenge for me in my state to go back, if the TC recommends that we all share in that burden, to have to go back to my fishermen and say, we've given up 2/3 of our 1998 allocation, we've underachieved as a region, yet we're going to have to cut a few months off the season or make an adjustment to the size limit. We're talking, there's two different paths we can take right now, and I'd like to know, get some more feedback and thought from other board members on which path they think is the appropriate path. I personally feel like we should come up with some buffer more than 99.4% as the projected catch in 2015 is being presented to us under status quo measures. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Michael. When Kirby gave his presentation initially, he mentioned that that particular option would likely result in 99.4% of the total RHL for 2015. So that's the number we were given, and motion was made relative to that particular option and was adopted by the board. So that's the way it stands right now. Rob.
So just to let everyone know, the plan development team had a conference call, and this was one of the issues. I don't think it really came to any type of consensus. I know the technical committee is very anxious to have what the amount of the buffer is. My thoughts on the buffer are that there's a pretty good number of years where states applied buffers for the most part on their own under conservation equivalency when it was state specific, and the 3 years 2008 through 10, it was about a 38% underage of the RHL. If there's going to be problems, I don't think the difference between 95% and 99.4% really are going to be a big issue. The reason I asked about the stock status, and I'm not going to ask now, is just to give everyone a feel for what to expect, what's out there, what's the SSB, what's really going on with the stock. So I support the 99.4%. In the background, I'm still wary. I'm still wary of the future of what we're doing, and I would like to ask, when the time is right, to ask about what the PDT can do to move towards these situations that will face us in the future when we're not worried about 99.4 or 95, we're worried about 20% over the RHL. And so I would like to talk about that when the chair allows. But I'll support the current 99.4%. That Dave Simpson included.
All right, we've made our decision. However, in light of what Rob just said, it would be useful for the board to be given a brief summary of the conference call that was held by the plan development team, because as you indicated, Rob, the plan development team did have some thoughts relative to future planning for how we should do our business relative to the RHL and the buffer. So, Kirby, would you provide us with a summary of what was discussed and if there were any conclusions or recommendations? And after Kirby is through, if there's something that he has not covered, then I will turn to other members of the plan development team and get your views as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As Rob noted, yes, the Plan Development Team met by conference call on Friday last week to discuss the two elements regarding the draft Addendum 26, the first being how and where cuts or reductions could be made to regions under different scenarios if there was a preferred consensus on approach. The group did not offer one in particular. The other discussion point was with regards to developing a set of management measures that account for a buffer relative to the coastwide recreational harvest limit. The technical committee members on the call were able to explain that under different scenarios, different buffers could possibly be applied in terms of increased precision. But again, there was no consensus offered on how addressing a buffer under any of the specific management, regional management options should go forward. And then lastly, the plan development team also was able to review the options that New Jersey had provided and did not offer any specific comments on those options.
All right, thank you, Kirby. So the issues were discussed. There was no consensus, just different points of view were expressed. So I'm assuming, therefore, the plan development team will continue those discussions. In the meantime, we have made our decision for 2015 status quo measures, and we'll see how it plays out. Bill Adler.
Mr. Chairman, do you need a motion to approve the addendum as approved today? Do we need that?
Yes, I believe we've finished our business on the different options for consideration in the addendum, so I would entertain a motion along those lines.
Okay, I'll make that motion to approve the addendum 26 as modified today.
Motion by Bill Adler, seconded by Emerson. I'll read it. Move to approve Addendum 26 as modified today. Motion by Mr. Adler, seconded by Mr. Hasbrook. All right. Discussion on the motion. Tom.
Just remind you it's a roll call vote.
Thank you for that, Tom.
Unless it's unanimous.
Unless it's unanimous, but I suspect it's not. So we'll have a roll call vote. If you will, Kirby, please read the roll.
Going north to south, Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Yes.
The state of Rhode Island.
Yes.
The state of Connecticut.
Yes.
The state of New York.
Yes.
The state of New Jersey.
No.
The state of Delaware.
Yes.
The state of Maryland.
Yes.
Potomac River Fisheries Commission.
Yes.
The Commonwealth of Virginia.
Yes.
State of North Carolina.
Yes.
U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Abstain.
National Marine Fisheries Service.
Abstain.
The motion passes 9-1 to 0-2.
All right, so the motion passes. The addendum has been adopted. All right. Next on the agenda is consider approval of State 2015 Black Sea Bass Recreational Proposals. This is final action. We have, first of all, a technical committee report from John, if you would.
2014, the board and council voted to continue ad hoc regional management. This splits the coast into a northern region of Massachusetts through New Jersey, where they have individual state proposals, and the southern region, which adopts federal measures. In 2015, that would be 12.5 inches, 15 fish possession limit, May 15th through September 21st, and October 22nd through December 31st. Total harvest for 2014 is projected to be 1.9 million fish, which is significantly over the 2014 RHL. The 2015 RHL is approximately 1.3 million fish, which requires a 32.8% reduction. That reduction is going to come out of the northern states where the overharvest has occurred, and some of these states are considering using changes to the minimum size as a tool to achieve that reduction. And to illustrate the impacts of that size change, we've calculated the number of additional dead discards due to size change. And you'll see that in the proposals from Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey. Massachusetts 2014 fishery harvested 438,000 fish. All modes had a possession limit of 8 fish at 14 inches from May 17th through September 15th, and there was also the For Hire letter of authorization program, which had a 20 fish possession limit during September and did not fish during Wave 4. There were no MRIP intercepts in Massachusetts for black sea bass during Wave 5, which is the period of the increased possession limit for the LOA program, in which the for hire modes actually possess more than 8 fish per contributor. Harvest by the LOA fishery has not been reviewed by the TC. All we really know about is that there were 8 vessels that participated, and therefore it is difficult to assess the impact of the LOA program on state harvest. All of Massachusetts' proposals include a 14-inch minimum size limit. All of the options have the same measures for all modes. The status of the LOA program is uncertain at this time. Possession limits that they use to achieve the reduction range from 1 to 8 fish with various seasons. This table should be available to you in your materials, so I'm not going to go through all the options at this time. Rhode Island's 2014 black sea bass fishery landed 203,000 fish. They had a 13-inch minimum size, a split possession limit of 3 and 7 fish, with the season that ranged from June 29th through December 31st. The proposal for Rhode Island was straightforward, and they will use a combination of season size and possession limit changes to achieve the reduction. Again, this table is available. I'm not going to go through it. I'll just point out that the options at the bottom utilize the 14-inch minimum size, which is a 1-inch size increase. And the additional dead discards associated with these measures is equivalent to approximately 6,000 fish. Connecticut's 2014 recreational sea bass fishery harvested 373,000 fish. They had a 13-inch minimum size. All modes had a split possession limit, 3 fish and 8 fish, with a season that went from June 21st through December 31st. They did have a for hire exemption program, which is equivalent to Massachusetts LOA, in which the 8 fish possession limit existed throughout the entire season. Connecticut has a logbook program for their exemption program, and they reported that 31 out of 40 vessels participated, and they reported 593 trips and approximately 20,000 fish harvested. Connecticut's for hire mode is 16% of the state's recreational black sea bass harvest, and I will say that after Connecticut analyzed their logbook data, only a very small or small percentage of the harvest actually was attributed to possession limits over the 3 fish possession limit. Something like 3,000 to 4,000 fish were actually a result of the increased bag limit. Connecticut's measures consider size limits of 13 through 14 inches, split possession limits, and season contractions and extensions. In some cases, if you utilize a 14-inch minimum size, you could actually extend your season because you account for more than the required reduction. They also anticipate continuing their LOA program or their exemption program. In this case, in instances where there are 13.5-inch minimum size was used, there's approximately 9,000 additional dead discards, and when the 14-inch minimum size is used, approximately 20,000 additional dead discards. New York's 2014 recreational black sea bass fishery had a 13-inch minimum size, 8 fish from July 15th through December 31st, and harvested approximately 517,000 fish. The proposal from New York is also straightforward. We'll use season length and possession limit changes to achieve the reduction. In New York, measures that utilize 13.5 inches generate approximately 9,000 additional dead discards, whereas when we use 14 inches, it's about 25,000 additional dead discards. New Jersey's measures included 12.5 inches, 15 fish from a number of interrupted seasons with a 3-fish possession limit during wave 4, and they harvested 386,000 fish. New Jersey also had a straightforward proposal using season, possession, and minimum size to achieve the reduction. Could you just scroll down, please? So when New Jersey utilizes the 13-inch minimum size limit, they do have a 9,000 fish additional dead discards. Oh, okay. Got it.
Okay. All right, so the technical committee report has been given by John, and my understanding is that the technical committee has approved all of the Black Sea Bass recreational proposals for 2015. Am I correct? Okay. That has been confirmed. Questions of the technical committee report and their findings? Tom?
Yeah, since they were all charter boats in that program there, did you happen to look at the logbooks to see what the logbook said on the catch? Since the logbooks are mandatory with federal permits.
Tom, what state are you referring to?
Massachusetts, when you had no reports from the MREPs, then nobody sampled those boats. I was wondering if you had looked at the logbooks to get some information on what went on. Since you did that with Connecticut, they had logbooks.
Connecticut did that analysis and presented it to the technical committee. We haven't received any analysis of the LOA program for Massachusetts yet.
If I may, Tom, our staff, new staff taking over for Paul Caruso, Michael Benarski, he, of course, is involved in technical committee deliberations. He has been given the charge within our state to take a look at all of those logbooks. He hasn't yet finished that work. Obviously, my agency is curious as to how well did it work, how well was the LOA, was it effective, how many black sea bass were caught. Whether or not we're going to have that LOA for 2015 is still an open question. We may not. We have to evaluate it first. That's all the information I can give you for now. Tom?
So when that work is done, you'll bring it before the board?
We'll bring it before the board to let you know the conclusions that we have reached, bring the data to the board so you'll know. Obviously, we don't want to approve an LOA program, let it go forward, that will cause problems relative to the take of black sea bass in 2015. We did the LOA in 2014 because party boat operators, primarily charter boat operators, felt that they needed the option for fall fishing. So we gave them the option of making a choice. You fish earlier in the year or not. LOA in the fall, and some did take advantage of it. Not too many, but some did. So we'll see what the results are, and then when we get those results, we'll share them with the board. David.
Yeah, just related, I guess. I was going to say for Connecticut, I understand there were some changes in the MRIP procedures in terms of how they handled charter boats last year. And I'll say between 2013 and 2014, we saw much better correspondence between the MRIP harvest estimate for those modes and the information we got from the logbook. So that was reassuring. So that lined up much better in 2014. In 2013, MRIP didn't pick up more than a couple of party charter trips, and so that segment of the fishery really wasn't represented at all, and that was actually one of our initial motivations for having the program, because they were very concerned that their small but important to them fishery would not be recognized and wouldn't have a chance in the future. And I guess while I have the mic, as we think about meeting our expectations here for black sea bass and back to summer flounder, I've made this comment to a couple other individuals. I guess it's too late, but we could use some help in federal waters. Is my point. We could use some more aggressive, more conservative management in federal waters in terms of minimum sizes for black sea bass and summer flounder. That would help the buffer a lot. I guess that ship has sailed for 2015, but it creates incredible problems for our state's ability to manage these harvest limits and get enforcement and compliance on these two species in particular. And I've shared some of the experiences I know people on my staff have had on for hire vessels fishing in federal waters, where it's pretty much perceived to be a free fishing day. You can pretty much do anything you want in federal waters, just have all the fish processed and put away before you come back into state waters, and that's very concerning to me. I brought that up on summer flounder last year. Pretty good evidence of that. A lot of non-compliance with minimum sizes because there's not much in the way of conservation measures in place in federal waters. So I think it's an area, if we're looking to be a little more conservative, we could do that with a fairly level playing field up and down the coast.
Okay, thank you, David. Since Tom raised the question about Massachusetts, a legitimate question, I should make a couple of points for the benefit of the board. The presentation was given at the NEMAP meeting a little earlier on regarding our bottom trawl survey that we do in the spring and the fall in Massachusetts. And we use that, of course, as a way to judge availability of black sea bass and other species to our recreational and commercial fisheries. The fall 2014 index of abundance for black sea bass skyrocketed. I mean, really skyrocketed. Again, pointing out that abundance of black sea bass, certainly in the New England area and absolutely in Massachusetts waters, it continues to rise. And fish, of course, are moving around the Cape and heading up to the state of Maine and New Hampshire, which is why Terry Stockwell is sitting here and why Steve Train is here as well, and Doug Ralph for that matter. So the abundance is there. But as a consequence of that, Massachusetts, the Division of Marine Fisheries, with our advisory commission, we've taken some further steps to deal with all sorts of issues regarding black sea bass compliance, recreational fisheries compliance. So in 2014, last year, we actually went to public hearing with some proposals that would affect charter vessels, headboat operators, and we then, as a consequence of those proposals, public hearings, we enacted some regulations that will make charter boat and headboat operators responsible for any violations that may be committed on their vessels. So we've taken a rather significant step in putting the burden on the captains, on the vessel owners to hold their clients accountable. Otherwise, they will pay the price for any compliance problems that may exist on board their vessels on any particular trip. In addition, we're seeking an increase in fines for any fish violations that may occur, and we're also stepping up our involvement with our meetings with our Massachusetts environmental law enforcement to call to their attention the likelihood of there being a compliance problem in 2015 because of this increased abundance of black sea bass. In addition, now they know that we have this improvement in enforcement relative to who's going to bear the responsibility of any infractions, and then, of course, the possibility of the increase in fines. So we're taking noncompliance very seriously in our state through the actions that we've taken, and party boat operators, the for-hire operators, are supportive of it as well, reluctantly, but they understand the need to be held accountable as well in light of this resurgence of black sea bass, this high abundance of black sea bass in our waters. So I just wanted to give that information to the board so you know that we're doing everything we can to be on top of the situation. Tom.
Yeah, and that's when I didn't say any comments on when we got the discussion about summer flounder, whether we should be 95 or 99, because we're still listed as summer flounder, and I'm as a tier 3. That means we have a lot of buffers built in because they're not satisfied with the data, so they take right off the top of the stock assessment. I always ask the question, since summer flounder we have the most information on, and we're still at tier 3, what do we do to get to tier 2 or tier 1, which it should be? And the same thing with black sea bass. When we talk about buffers, they still have it listed as tier 4. So we are fishing below what the stock assessment tells us what we should be fishing at, and probably underestimating what the stock is because that is so data poor. Now, that wouldn't be a problem if we had just started having this data poor problem, but I remember sitting here in 93 and we started the plan saying it was data poor, we needed to do something better with black sea bass and scup, and we're sitting here 21 years later and have not done anything better, and the fishermen, both commercial and recreational, are suffering the consequences, and we're having all these problems trying to stay within a quota that's based on a stock that's below, way above the size that they're setting up the regulations, so it makes our job very difficult every year in trying to do this. And I wish sooner or later we start moving them up the steps. Can the Mid-Atlantic, somebody from the Mid-Atlantic actually tell me how long we're going to have to wait for that? I know about a year ago they said there was going to be some progress in moving those up. I got from the National Marine Fisheries Service, and I don't really see any progress in moving them up.
Before I ask for a motion regarding the black sea bass recreational proposals for 2015, we should be updated with regards to what possibly may happen this year relative to the overall quota for black sea bass. That would affect, of course, the recreational take as well. My understanding is that there have been some discussions between our technical committee and the SSC, the Mid-Atlantic Council's SSC, and this has implications for 2015 and maybe even 2016, more likely 16. So, Kirby or John, could you give us an update as to where we stand with that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, in follow-up to the December joint meeting between the Mid-Atlantic Council and ASMFC, the subsection of the technical committee, in concert with the Mid-Atlantic staff, have met to plan out and try to address a strategy to put forward to the SSC by their March 2015 meeting alternative approaches for setting the 2015 ABC, allowable biological catch. In doing so, a subsection of the technical committee, in concert with a subsection of the SSC, are going to evaluate a couple of different strategies to be considered and then presented, which could allow for the SSC to reconsider the current 2015 ABC. That has yet to be put forward officially to the SSC in terms of results. And another important point to point out is that in doing so, timing-wise, has been communicated to the Commission by the Mid-Atlantic staff, is that it will likely not be in time to change the federal measures, and as such, if there is a change to the 2015 ABC, it may only affect what the subsequent ACL and accountability measures may be, as those are over multi-year running averages.
All right, so these are discussions in progress. The technical committee with some ideas being offered up to the SSC. We'll see how it works out. And possibly we would have an increase in the ABC, or obviously the SSC would have to recommend to the Mid-Atlantic Council an increase in the ABC. The National Marine Fisheries Service would have to review that and consider whether it was appropriate. And if indeed it was increased for 2015, that would have implications for 2016, meaning if there is an overage in 15, it might not be as great. In other words, there may not be as much payback, if any payback, in 2016. Again, it's up in the air. We don't know. But at least credit needs to be given to our technical committee for the work that they've done on this, with ideas that they have generated. So we'll just have the technical committee keep us updated as to their progress. And certainly Mid-Atlantic Council members around this table will be well aware of the nature of those discussions through your involvement with your own SSC. Rob.
So as much as I'd like to be about optimistic, I think probably things won't occur as fast as Tom Fode said. They've already been 21 years in a situation, and the technical committee is doing an incredible volume of work already. It's really something. Having been there in the past, by far they're really just doing incredible work. I want to commend the technical committee. I have one suggestion, which is, now that there's been 4 out of 5 overages, because there's a lot of fish and because regulations constrain the amount of fish that can be taken. So in 5 years, there's been 4 overages. They bounced around a little bit. The last 2 I remember, of course, the one today that John presented, 32.8%. We finally settled on around 3% last time around. Is there something, since the constant catch is still there and having an influence for black sea bass, is there something the technical committee either has looked at or could look at in terms of the seasons? I was really surprised to hear the way the technical committee or some of the members can work with MRIP data down to very small levels. And I think if the tradition is still now, the new tradition from about 10 years ago, to look at a wave and to look at harvest as spread across that wave evenly, that if there hasn't been time to look at the data that's gone the last 4 or 5 years to sort of pinpoint that there might be a better way to look at these seasonal closures. I don't know whether that's been done. I don't know how much of an impact we've had, but the only reason I bring it up, if we're stuck in this system that we've been in, anything might help the swings that we seem to be having year to year in the management.
Thank you, Rob. Those are good comments. I'm going to hold them in abeyance for a second, though, because I would like to get a motion on the board relative to the black sea bass proposals for this year. So, Rick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had one quick question, if I could, for John, if it's not
sure.
So my question is in regards to the tables that were submitted by Rhode Island. Is it that the methodology used to create those options is what was approved, or is it those specific numbers? I ask because maybe due to public hearings at our state, we may end up with a little variation of those, but if the methodology is the same, could it be assumed that those would be also approved, or are we stuck with the measures that are listed in that particular table?
For the past several years, we've always asked the board to essentially approve the methodology and left that flexibility for states to adjust as long as they're still constraining their harvest to the required reduction.
All right. Is there a motion? David.
Move to approve the proposals and methodologies for use in 2015 management as reviewed and approved by the technical committee.
All right, the motion is on the screen. David, is that your motion?
That's it, yeah. Do I need to say black sea bass, the black sea bass proposals, just to be real clear?
Yes, please. Thank you. All right. There is the motion. Is there a second? Bill Adler has seconded the motion. I will read the motion. Move to approve the black sea bass proposals and methodologies for use in 2015 management as approved by the technical committee. Motion by Mr. Simpson, second by Mr. Adler. Is there discussion on the motion? Adam.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me first say again, I appreciate the efforts of the technical committee recently, working with the Mid-Atlantic's SSC, the Mid-Atlantic staff, Mid-Atlantic council members, and members of this commission. 5 years ago, we were looking at an ABC of less than 2.5 million pounds for black sea bass. We're now at 5.5 million, so clearly the efforts of all those involved have been good for the fishery, headed in the right direction. That being said, the measures that we put here forth today are essentially untenable to the for-hire sector, untenable to a targeted black sea bass fishery that affects marinas, bait and tackle stores, restaurants, everyone involved with this fishery. I'm embarrassed to be sitting here today looking at these regulations and knowing that there hasn't been something better to do for fishermen. It's painful to see those. It's painful to see the impact that it's had. It's painful to hear that the regulations we put forth today are going to waste fish by discards. This is not the intent of this commission. This is not the intent of federal laws under Magnuson-Stevens of what we should be doing. It's just painful to me to sit here today and do this. I feel I've already used my quota of motions that won't get a second, so I'll refrain from moving forward with a motion for status quo on measures, although I believe it's in the best interest of the fishermen that we represent and probably the fish that we are supposedly here to protect and make the best decisions for as well. But that being said, there's no way that I can support this motion that is before the board today.
Further discussion on the motion? Is there a need for a caucus? Okay, 60 seconds or so for a caucus. All right, are we through with the caucusing? I believe we are. Okay. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by raising your hand.
It's a roll call.
I'm sorry. I apologize. It's a roll call vote. All right.
Heading from the north-south, Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Yes.
My apologies. We have other more northern states with a declared interest in the fishery. Maine?
Yes.
New Hampshire?
Yes.
Noting Massachusetts earlier, yes. The state of Rhode Island?
Yes.
Connecticut?
Yes.
State of New York?
Abstain.
State of New Jersey?
No.
State of Delaware?
Yes.
State of Maryland?
Yes.
Potomac River Fisheries Commission?
Yes.
Commonwealth of Virginia?
Yes.
State of North Carolina?
Yes.
U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service?
Abstain.
National Marine Fisheries Service?
Abstain.
Okay, the motion is adopted on a vote of... Again. 10 in favor, 1 opposed.
0 no, 3 abstentions.
No no votes and 3 abstentions. All right. Thank you. Next on the agenda is the State 2015 Scup recreational proposals for final action, which I guess means a roll call vote, right? Technical committee report from John.
So I probably should have brought this up with the Black Sea Bass proposals, and I apologize. So how we handle noncompliance in the intercepts is been an issue that we've been discussing actually for the last couple of years, and we're still working on a method of, or at least a policy of how we handle things in a standardized manner so that all states calculate their reductions in the same way. So this is a work in progress for the technical committee, but with regards to the proposals you saw today for Black Sea Bass, in general, we assume that noncompliance with respect to possession limits and size limits will remain non-compliant in the face of new, more restrictive measures, and we feel that this is generally a conservative approach. Would you mind going about 2? Yeah. So 2014 measures for the states of Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and New York was a 10-inch minimum size, 30-fish possession limit, and season from May 1st to December 31st, and this is for Scup. Each state also had a single wave bonus season for hire vessels, in which the possession limit was 45 fish for anglers fishing from them. Connecticut had different measures in 2014. They had 10.5-inch minimum size for private anglers, an 11-inch minimum size for hire vessels, and a 9-inch minimum size at their enhanced shore sites. The possession limit was 20 fish for all, although Connecticut did have a for hire bonus season of 45 fish during Wave 5. The 2014 recreational harvest of Scup was approximately 4.4 million pounds, 4.1 million fish. The northern states, Massachusetts through New York, account for 99% of the coast-wide harvest in 2014, and that's a pretty consistent trend, 99%, 98% of the coast-wide harvest. The 2013 harvest was 5 million pounds, so there was a decrease despite the liberalization of regulations. And the RHL for 2015 is 6.8 million pounds, so there's room for as much as a 50% liberalization, although there's a new stock assessment in 2015, and there's a great deal of uncertainty regarding just how large that biomass actually is. 2015 measures for Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and New York proposed to remain at status quo. However, changes to federal measures will allow for hire vessels to pursue the higher possession limits during their bonus season in federal waters. In 2015, Connecticut proposes to liberalize their regulations to match those in the other states in the northern region. So that would include, again, a 10-inch minimum size, 30-fish possession limit, the season going from May 1st through December 31st, with the 45-fish bonus season for the for-hire fleet in Wave 5. They also will continue to offer 9-inch minimum size at enhanced shore sites. While this is a 56% liberalization for Connecticut, it's only an 8% liberalization for the northern region.
Any questions for John? Bob.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John, so with reference to the increased federal allowance on the bonus to 50 fish, is it your representation that the states of Mass, Rhode Island, and New York are offering regulations that are compliant with that are consistent, I should say, with that, or is there a need to adjust to become consistent?
None of the states offer proposals to increase their bonus season possession limit beyond 45.
if I could follow, Mr. Chair, I think we would want to do that. I'm wondering if this is the time and place. I think we would be out of sync if we didn't have state water regulations that were consistent with the newly adopted federal water regulations. As I remember, they were adopted at the joint meeting in December. If this is too late, if Rhode Island, among perhaps the other neighboring states, didn't get the proposals in on time, then I guess we would have to deal with that. But is there a time and opportunity here today to propose state measures that would be consistent with the federal, particularly given where we are with Scup? Thank you.
Yeah, Tony?
We would need to know what the impacts are, but the federal measures are not consistent with your entire set of measures anyway. I mean, that would put your bag limits the same, but the federal measures are typically designed. Let me go back for a second. Because 97% of the harvest is really caught in these 4 northern states, with a small portion being caught in New Jersey, we do this conservation equivalency program through the commission so that we can set regulations that meet the needs of those 5 states. And that federal measures are typically set in conjunction, more aligned with New Jersey, which has the actual fishery in federal waters, whereas the majority of the northern states' fishery is occurring in state waters. So your season and your size limits do not line up with the federal measures either. So typically we don't even look at the federal measures when we're putting together these 4 states proposals. So without having, unless we can do it on the fly, we would need to know what the impacts of changing the bag limit would be right now in order to put that proposal forward. But typically we haven't lined up in the past with federal measures for these states because they have been so divergent in how we've had to put those measures together in order to provide that flexibility to those northern states to meet the needs of their fishermen. And in particular, in times when we've had to be more restrictive.
Okay, thank you, Tony. All right. Is there a motion? David, motion maker.
So, you know, the Fed's adopting 50 fish, just like with the other species. Again, frustrates me because state waters fishermen always have to carry the load in these federally driven plans. So that's very frustrating to me. Reluctantly, you know, we've held status quo measures in Connecticut for something like 3 years. When we were allowed to liberalize, we didn't for 2 reasons. One, we were trying to provide that stability in measures over time that the public asked for, and 2, I've believed for a long time that the stock isn't as big as the stock assessment suggests it is. That's why all of a sudden, you know, the recreational fishery has gone from, you know, can't be constrained to the harvest to can't possibly catch it, even with 45 fish bag limits in their party boats and 10-inch minimum sizes and so forth. And the commercial fishery can't come close to catching their quota no matter what they set for a trip limit. Having said all that, facing a stock assessment next year, I have to protect our fishery and I have to liberalize so that we don't get stuck with a lower allocation in the future if there is this expected, to me, correction in the actual stock size. So with that long preamble, I'm going to move approval of Connecticut's measures for 2015 to bring our state consistent with our neighbors and what the plan allows.
Okay, so your motion is specific to Connecticut, all right? I'll wait till it's up on the board. Could I make a suggestion for a change to make things simpler? Because we don't know, something along the lines of to approve the New York, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts measures for 2015 and Connecticut's measures for 2015 to ensure consistency with the other states, something like that.
That's fine, or I can just spell them out. I think it should be clear, Connecticut's reduction in minimum size and increase in bag limit to be consistent with Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and New York, perhaps.
All right, we'll go with your wording. All right, so is that your motion?
Maureen, maybe we'll just start again. So move to approve Connecticut's reduction in minimum size to 10 inches and increase in bag limit to 30 fish to be consistent with the states of Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and New York in 2015. And with the understanding that I don't think this needs to be in the motion, but the understanding for everyone that our 9-inch shore mode would also be continued in 2015. But I think that will be clear enough 6 months from now when people read it what we did.
All right, that's the motion. Is there a second? Okay, Jim. All right, I'll read the motion. Move to approve Connecticut's reduction in minimum size, 10 inches, and increase in bag limit to 30 fish to be consistent with the states of Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and New York for 2015. Motion by Mr. Simpson, seconded by Mr. Gilmore. All right, so this is specific to Connecticut. It doesn't include any reference to what will be in place in the other states. And we need a roll call vote on this, I assume. This is final action specific to Connecticut with consistency with the other states being made clear, although we don't know what. Okay. All right. Any discussion on the motion? I'm sorry. Any discussion on the motion? Yes. I see no discussion. Caucus? No? All right. So roll call vote.
Any objections?
Oh, all right. Any objections? No objections. All right. So with no objection, the motion is adopted. That was easy. All right. Any other motions relative to Scup measures for 2015? I assume with no motions, it'll be status quo for the other states. All right. Is that clear? Clear to the board? Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I realize it's late in the day, so this is my fault, but I'm going to ask Tony or Kirby to walk me through again this issue of where we are with regard to the federal regulations on Scup for 2015 and how they compare with the, I guess it would be the status quo state regulations. I'm just concerned about the disconnect, and I realize, well, I'll just stop there and ask if you could please review so I can be reminded as to where we stand, because there were changes made at the joint meeting in December, and I just want to try to reconcile those with where we are here today. Thank you.
Tony, are you up to that?
I got it.
Okay, Kirby.
So at the joint meeting in December, the board council approved for federal measures to be 9 inches, 50 fish, in a open year-round season. And as such, in previous years, the southern states, which constitutes Delaware south through Jersey south, through North Carolina, have made their measures match those of the federal measures. And as such, that the intention is for them to continue with matching their measures in 2015 with that of the federal measures.
Thank you for that. So it's clear that the federal waters regulations for 2015 will be 9-inch minimum size, 50 fish in a year-round season. We are, unless there's another motion, the board seems prepared to allow or to continue status quo measures for the 4 states, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Mass, and New York. That has a 45 fish bonus season, as I understand it, associated with them. So for Rhode Island and the other 3 states, the increase in the bag limit to 50 fish will not be something that the states can avail themselves. Those 4 hire vessels, others from those 4 states cannot avail themselves of that more liberal federal, of those more liberal federal regulations. Am I correct in my understanding of how that will work?
That is correct.
Yes, that is correct. Unless a motion is made to increase it to 50. And if a motion is made to increase it to 50, if I understand Tony correctly, that would necessitate some technical committee review. And I assume that review would indicate there's no problem in light of the fact that we have fallen far short of the harvest, fallen far short of our target for 2014. So, go ahead, Tony.
We haven't done an analysis. You are correct, Dave. We fell far short of our RHL for Scup. So I don't know what the measure would be, but normally our process is that the states would submit proposals after the December meeting in order to come to this meeting with measures. We approve those measures here and go forward. If it's the will of the board to want to consider this, we can move forward with having the TC just do a check on it to make sure that it's copacetic with the RHL. Is it something that the board is interested in doing? And then we can either do an email vote to increase it if that is something that you are interested in doing.
It is February, and if there is a desire to increase it by 5 fish for the bonus season, then we'll have to postpone any final action. Each state will have to postpone final action on what to do in 2015 until after that review occurs. So it's up to the board as to whether or not it's a desired action. David.
It's not to me. It's, as I've said, every opportunity I get, the federal government does not do as much as the states. They're more liberal. They're more liberal on summer flounder. They're more liberal on black sea bass. They're more liberal on scup. It always falls to the states to do the bulk of the conservation. So I do not want to consider a 9-inch minimum size and a 50 fish limit with an open season year-round for all our fisheries. I don't think that would be the right thing to do a year before a stock assessment, unless you want to set the stage for a reallocation argument. But I don't think it would be reasonable to do it.
All right, thank you, David. I have to turn to staff for some clarification. We did take action on Connecticut. Are we going to need action on Scup recreational proposals for the balance of the states?
As you said on the record before, you were all indicating that you wanted to stay status quo, so therefore then no motion is necessary because you put that on the record.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to make sure. All right. All right, we've gone through fluke scup and black sea bass. There was nothing else on the agenda regarding those stocks. Is there any other business before the board? Yes, Joe.
That motion is showing that there was a roll call. Is that what that roll call is for? Because on my record does not show that there was a roll call on that vote. It's moved without objection. Why is the roll call?
It requires to do the final action, it requires the roll call vote. Because there was no objection, we know that all the states agreed to those measures.
Somebody doesn't say, I missed the roll call.
No, you did not miss a roll call.
I'm glad you're on the ball, Joe. Thank you. You are vigilant, that's for sure. Thank you. All right. Is there any other business before the board? I see none. Therefore, the meeting is adjourned.